Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back, everyone, to a new lecture in this course on modern transactions. So, one of the most controversial transactions, modern financial transactions, is the transactions of people buying things through the bank. The reason I phrased it that way is that traditionally, in traditional banking systems, it's usually referred to as taking out a loan from the bank. Now, whenever you take out a loan, a dain, automatically the Sharia's mind is going to go to the restrictions on taking out a dain, al-bay' al-kali' bil-kali', to sell a debt with debt, and then in equal amounts, therefore being riba. So because of that, a lot of the modern fuqaha and modern fiqh bodies originally were like, well, this is impermissible. Of course, that name, as I've said in previous lectures, is an incorrect name. If you're buying something, it's not a loan, it's finance. The bank is financing the thing. In some modern Muslim majority countries, they've actually changed the name to tamwil. And I'll get into why that's significant. That's my part that I want to impart to you. But the lecture notes that I have are based on describing how modern Islamic financial institutions construct the transaction to avoid the idea that I am going to take a loan out from the bank, buying something and then increasing the amount. So there is a modern financial instrument that is created by the modern Islamic banking system that avoids that, and that is called al-murabaha lil-amiri bil-shira. So it's a type of murabaha, it's a type of gaining profit with the promise of buying. In other words, the bank buys something for me and I promise to buy it from the bank. So there are actually two separate transactions that are put together to create one transaction. We'll talk about that in this lecture, and I will also talk about the other way of interpreting the conventional banking's idea of finance. That's what we'll talk about in this lecture. We'll pick up the discussion, inshallah, in the next clip. Okay, so the problem that we're trying to solve. Well, first of all, before the problem, let's not talk about positive stuff before we talk about the problems. The idea of ribh, the idea of profit, is something that's very much embedded in any type of transaction. If you don't make a profit, then you're not going to be able to sustain a business. It's just kind of one of the sunnahs of the way the world is. If I buy stuff and I sell this, if I buy the stuff for 100, whatever the stuff is, and I sell it for 100, then what was the point? Is the idea. So the idea behind any basic, trade or commerce is that you're going to buy something at a lower price and sell it for a higher price. Make a profit so that you can buy more of the things, and then the profit is what you live by and what you pay for the store and rent and all that kind of stuff. Or if you own the store, just basic type of expenses. In addition to the price of things increase. So if I buy books for $100 and then I trade in only Shafi'i books, let's say, and plus or minus I can get a good collection of books for $100. And I do this year in and year out, but then the price of paper and all ink and stuff and processing and printing goes up. Now the books are $150. Well, I have no extra money to be able to buy those new books, so I'm out of business. So the idea of ribh is something that is embedded in commerce, and therefore it is equally acknowledged across the madhahib that it is permissible, al-murabaha, that when I go to buy something, I know that I am buying the thing from this merchant for more than its raw cost. And that's the job of the merchant, is because I don't know I'm not going to go to the jungles and the farms of Africa and Asia to buy coffee. I mean, I know that when I go to buy coffee at the store, it doesn't cost, because I was in the coffee business. I know this. The coffee bag on the store, it doesn't cost that. Those are extra costs of roasting, of packaging, of processing, of shipping the coffee over. So I'm paying for that convenience, obviously, and then they're making money. And as the Arabs say, وَهَلُمَّ جَرَّ, and so on and so forth, to all things. So the Sharia acknowledges that, and that is a natural part of trade. It's something that the madhahib agree to. And they call this a ribh. Whether it's the Hanafis, the Malikis, the Shafi'is, or the Hanbalis, they call this profit. Now, one of the interesting, and all of the madhahib are equal to that. There are some little minor details about how you describe the profit, and that's not really neither here nor there for the purposes of this discussion. But one of the interesting things is that embedded in the Sharia is this idea as the consumer, or in this case more specifically as the buyer, you have the right to know what is the core cost versus what is the ribh. Because then you can decide, well, I can find it somewhere else for cheaper or things like that. But in general, so there's a type of, let's say, consumer protection embedded in the basic Sharia transaction. Or it's not really, it's more consumer awareness. I mean, I guess protection is something else. There is the muhtasib and other types of roles and jobs in the Sharia, which is, by the way, it's worth mentioning here, is another sub-field of Islamic law, all of the jobs and trades and professions that have existed throughout Islamic history, and there are many books that are been written about that. So the muhtasib is one of those, is a person that's sort of in the marketplace, and he kind of regulates and makes sure that that's where the consumer protection is. So what I was just mentioning is more like consumer awareness. You have the right as the consumer to buy and know what you're buying. And remember, gharar, unknown speculative transactions, is something that Sharia is like, we don't want that. Everything should be out in the open, which means that everyone acknowledges that the merchant, the seller, is going to make a profit, and the merchant has the right to make as much of a profit as they want, as long as the transaction is agreed to by both parties. So you can't say, I don't have anything with me, but I bought this little vial of itr, of perfume, and it was like $1,000. Some people be like, that's ridiculous. But there are perfumes that are, I've smelled them before. I don't have any, of course, and there are people that's their thing, they love to get it, and the Prophet ﷺ loved the perfume, alayhi salatu wasalam. So you can't say, well, that's mubalagh, that's too much. La, if both parties agreed, then fine. Maybe it's rare, it's a limited quantity. When something is usually in limited quantity and on the rare side, and the quality is high, obviously the price is going to go up. So off the bat, that whole concept of making money is not a problem, because وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Allah has made trade permissible, has made usury impermissible, and prohibited. What is trade? Well, trade is that you're buying and selling, and people are making money and acquiring things. Now, these type of transactions amongst the Salaf are just the type of transactions that were inherited, through the Muslim community, and then the fuqaha of every era just kind of confirmed, this is how trade is done, and this is compliant with the Sharia. So there was really no issue to deal with. However, the issue that we're dealing with is now, because of and this is really a function of that money is now separated from gold and silver. So now money is a lot. Things can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Those type of numbers didn't exist up until, the turn of the last century, because there was a limited amount of gold and silver, as I said before, and that's one of the ideas behind the gold and silver backed currency. Now, things are like through the roof, and paper money, the fiat currency, has no intrinsic values. The point is that there are many circumstances where you cannot afford to buy this thing that you need, like a home, or like a car, or certain appliances for the home, or something like that, or a farm, or you need a huge amount of livestock, or repair, whatever the case may be, these large, we say in English, large ticket items. And because of the emergence of the banking system and all of that, as we've said, is not really our system, it's something that came to us, so we're trying to deal with it, then this idea came up that the bank will help people buy these things. They will lend them out the money. That's the old term. That more accurate term, based on the takif, based on the conceptualization, is will help finance the thing for you. And in the West, at least what I'm familiar with, when you buy something that way, it's called financing. It's not called a loan. And this is a problem, as I'll mention maybe in the second or third clip, about not my objection, but my observation about what some of the Islamic banking, the philosophy behind what we're about to present, I think is a little off, not from the Sharia point of view, but from the point of view of they're conceptualizing the conventional idea. Anyway, the issue that we're trying to solve is that how do you buy a house or a bank or something like that, or forget about the house or the bank, anything for that matter, if you don't have the money. I'm a new Sharia student. I've been given a stipend and I have a grant, alhamdulillah, to study for a couple of years. One of the first things I need to do is I need to buy books, right? And I need to buy books in bulk because I'm going to be studying 7, 8 subjects over the next 2, 3 years. So I need the books that I'm studying, the commentaries on the books that I'm studying, the hawashi, and some reference books. Like, you're not going to study the of Imam Shafi'i, but yeah, you can't be a Shafi'i student if you don't have the and you pop in it every now and again. Or the Majmu'ah of Imam Nawawi. You're not going to read the Majmu'ah cover to cover, but you're going to pop into it every now and again when you're looking for comparative things from Adillah, disputes amongst the Iraqis and the Khurasanis, etc. So I need to buy the books up front. So I'm going to go to the bookseller and I'd be like, look, this is my list. I gave him like a couple pages of books that I need to buy. And it's a large ticket item. It's $2,000-$3,000. And I'm using dollars because that's a sort of, that's a reserve currency currently. And I'm an American as well as an Egyptian. So I just say, dollars. It just rolls off the tongue. But it could be pounds or francs or euros or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm trying to say. So it's a big ticket item. So the man says, well, how would you like to pay? And I'll tell him, well, look, I'm a new student. I've been accepted into the madrasa, to the jama'ah, but my stipend hasn't come in. I just arrived. I'm supposed to get the check at the end of the day, or I'm supposed to get the wire or the grant money at the end of the month. So either the guy is going to put them on hold for me, which would be very courteous of him, or we need to bring a third party that says, okay, I'll buy it for you, and then you can pay me back. That's essentially what we're looking at. I'm giving you a very pedestrian example just so we can kind of understand what the issue may be. Now, the third person here, what we're trying to solve is the bank. Okay, so in that transaction, usually what the man is going to do is, because he's a Sharia student, the likelihood of a Sharia student lying about buying books is very, very low. So he's like, okay, I'll put them on the side for you. Come back when you get the money and pay me. Or, and this has happened to me, here, take the books and pay me when you can. And that's actually happened to me. It's just as an anecdote, very touching. I said, I can't accept that. He's like, anybody who's going to buy this book will never lie. And that actually put a huge burden on me. So the minute I was traveling at the time, the minute I came home, I quickly set up the situation so I can pay the man, because I was like, I can't lie. I mean, look what the man said, he gave me this amana. Al-Muhim, in that example, that's usually what's going to happen. But it's not going to happen when you want to buy a car or buy a house. So how do we solve that problem? Let's look at the conventional side and then the Islamic banking solution in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, so the conventional side is you go to the bank for the finance. The problem with the conceptualization that some proponents of Islamic banking has is that they think you are going to the bank to take money to buy the house and then pay the bank more. But that's actually not the correct, this is not my opinion, this is factually incorrect. What happens is that the conventional bank buys the house, because the house seller is not going to wait. The house seller needs his money because they put in all of this money to build the walls and the utilities and the HVAC system and whatever, the appliance, whatever the case may be, the flooring, the wall, the insulation, all that stuff is an huge upfront cost. He needs to get paid so he can pay his subcontractors. So in that, actually, what's the takif, what's the conceptualization, is that the bank wires the money to the homeowner, and then you pay the bank back in installments in interest. So the first problem, and this is I'm interjecting to you because I got to be academically honest with you. I can't present you something that I know there are holes in it or something like that to the best of my ability. And I ask Allah Ta'ala to give me the humility to acknowledge when I don't know something, and to increase me in knowledge and increase you in knowledge in the things that we don't know, inshallah. Rabb Ameen. So the bank is not giving you the money for you to give to the people, and then they give you the money, and then you pay the bank. What's happening is the bank wires the money, which is very similar to what we're going to describe shortly with the Islamic banking alternative, and then you pay the bank back in installments. It's that paying the bank back in installments that causes a lot of modern fuqaha to be like, oh, that's riba. I talked to you about the difference of opinion about fiat currency not backed by gold and silver. The opinion of Imam Shafi'i is that there's no riba in the paper money. So from that point of view, and Egypt's Dar al-Ifta and other fatwa bodies in the Muslim world acknowledge that type of transaction is not haram. إِذَا تَوَاسَطَتِ السِّلَعِ. If there's a thing, an asset or thing that you're buying between you and the bank, then it's not a loan, it's considered tamweel, it's not a qard, it's considered tamweel. It's not a loan, it's considered finance, and therefore you can pay back. That's my position on it. Now let's go to the Islamic banking position, which is also a legitimate alternative position. By the way, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just criticizing the conceptualization of the conventional thing. So what's happening is I'm going to go to the bank. This is al-murabaha. What's it called? I forgot the name of the transaction. Al-murabaha lil-amiri bil-shira. So it's a type of profit with a promise to buy. So I go to the bank and I say, Islamic bank, please buy this house for me. Let's say the house costs $100,000. I wish that was the cost of a house, or a flat or a studio apartment, whatever. The house, $100,000. Buy it for me. And I promise I will buy this house back. I will buy this house from you for $135,000. And I will pay you in installments. So the Islamic banking alternative is to create two situations. Al-murabaha li'amir bil-shira. I will buy it from you if you buy this first. So the first transaction, the promise comes first, but in actuality the promise to buy from the bank comes second. So the first thing that happens in the transaction is that the Islamic bank goes and buys the house and holds the deed for the house. It has it. It paid it cash, $100,000. And then I've already promised in an agreement, and وَالْمُسْلِمُونَ عَنْدَ شُرُوطِهِمْ, as the Prophet ﷺ said, we have to behold to our conditions. I go to the bank and I say to the bank, okay, I will now buy this property for you for the price that we agreed to. I think I just said $135,000. And because obviously I don't have $135,000, I'm going to pay you in monthly or quarterly installments for the next so much years. That's the transaction that the Islamic banking system came up with. Notice how it's extremely similar to the way that we conceptualize and understood the conventional banking system. So, what is the position of the fiqh al-mawruth, the traditional fiqh, about that? There are a few opinions. Is my promise to buy the house from the Islamic bank mulzam? Is it obligatory? The first opinion says it's obligatory from the point of view of deen, but it's not obligatory and cannot be enforced from the point of view of the courts, which obviously creates a problem, because I could basically, shaft the bank and not buy it, and then the bank now has a property that they don't want. That's one position. The other position says no, it's obligatory deen-wise, meaning from the suluk point of view, and it's enforceable in the courts, because Allah Ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun kabura maqtan 'inda Allahi an taqulu ma la taf'alun. O you who believe, why do you say that which you don't do? This is a great thing with Allah Ta'ala, that you say something and that you don't do it. Surah As-Saf. And then also the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the sign of the hypocrite are three. Ayatul munafiq thalatha. إذا حدث كذب. When he speaks, he lies. With a wa'ada akhlafa, and if he promises, he violates his promise. With tumina khan, and if you trust him with something, he breaches your trust. So that's a sign of hypocrisy. So the second opinion says that's, it's both deen and qada, and both in the deen as moral obligation, and it's a legal obligation that can be enforced in the courts. Some of the Malikis said it can be enforced if there are conditions. So that's more of like a sub kind of opinion. And then a fourth opinion says, also another position of the Malikis is if the promise is with conditions, and those conditions cover that which you agreed to buy, which is the house. So it's not exterior conditions, it's internal conditions linked to the actual thing that you're going to buy. Obviously, it goes without saying that the proponents of this Islamic banking transaction have taken the position that obviously it is obligatory morally and legally, or else the bank is not going to do it for you. The bank is no bank, Islamic bank, the Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq bank, radiallahu anhu, there is not going to do this for you unless you promise to pay it back, because then it has no way, it will sink. It will sink very, very fast. It could sink within less than a year and become bankrupt, and then you've done harm to a lot of people who have trusted the bank for that. So any bank, Islamic bank, secular bank, usury bank, halal bank, haram bank, whatever you call it, any bank has to study your ability to pay that thing back. What we called your, I think in America we call it the credit score. It has other names. Your, al-qudra al-maliya, your ability, your financial ability and financial health to be able to pay this back. The bank is not going to buy you a hotel, and you're just like talib al-ilm. It's not going to happen. So I don't want you to think that when we say Islamic bank, that means that those type of checks and balances don't exist. It has to exist. So if the bank is going to do that and expend all of this effort and all of this capital on your behalf, it has to make sure that you can pay them back, and therefore, obviously, it holds the deed, so it can always sell the asset. But then that becomes difficulty, because when you have to sell something in a rush, you oftentimes sell at a loss. So, the proponents, as I said, of this transaction, they argue from a fiqh point of view that this promise, لِلْآمِرِ بِالشَّرَاء, so I am going to promise to buy it from you, and you're going to promise to sell it to me. That's mulzam, that's something that can be enforced through the law. And it's a murabaha, so the bank is going to make money from me. So because murabaha is permissible. So there are two things that are happening, just to repeat. The bank buys the house for $100,000 in the example that we gave, because I have promised to buy this property from the bank for $135,000. So I have promised to buy it, and therefore that promise is mulzam, it's obligatory and enforceable, morally and through the courts, legally, morally and legally. And we acknowledge from the outset that the bank is going to make a profit, because profit, murabaha, is permissible. There's no other way. The bank will never buy it for you and sell it to you at a loss, nor will it buy it for you and sell it and not have you promise or enforce that it can buy it, or else the bank will fail miserably quickly, and thousands or hundreds of thousands of people will have catastrophic financial disaster to befall them. So this is the transaction that's come up with the bank to avoid the scenario that I'm going to take a loan out and pay the loan later in higher amount of money, which some fuqaha will argue is an issue of usury. Now what's left to discuss is, we've mentioned that this is two transactions, not one transaction. What does the traditional fiqh say about allowing us to combine the transactions in one transaction? And that's something that we'll pick up inshallah in the next and final clip. So the Islamic banking transaction that we've been describing is made up of two individual transactions. The first transaction is that the bank is buying the house for the sticker price of the house, knowing that the person that's selling the house, by the way, is making money too. There's a ribh on that, but we don't need to say that. That's universally permissible. And then the issue of, I promise to buy something, like the bookseller, the example I gave, I promise to give the bookseller the $2,000 for my books once I get it. That's something that the fuqaha also agree to, is permissible, because you don't always have the cash right instantaneously, but there's a promise. And we talked about the differences of opinion if the promise is enforceable, if it's obligatory morally and legally. And we're taking the opinion in this case that it's both obligatory morally and enforceable legally. Now, the issue is about combining the transactions. This is also a difference of opinion. The Shafi'is and some of the other schools argue that it is impermissible to combine several transactions into one. And obviously, there's a dissenting opinion among some of the Shafi'is, Imam Ashhab from the Malikis, and one of the opinions of the Hanabila, that it is permissible to combine the transactions in one. Obviously, for this to work, you have to take that opinion, and that is what the international fiqh councils have opined, that that's the opinion that they adopt, that it is permissible to combine these two transactions into one transaction, or else it won't happen. I mean, it can't happen. And as I said before, when I was talking to you guys about this in this course, is that this is an issue, these modern transactions, you have to go beyond the madhab. And sometimes you have to take in many cases, beyond the mu'tamad of a madhab, beyond the reliable opinion of a madhab, as long as it's a valid dissenting opinion. So just because there's a mu'tamad of a madhab does not mean that you cannot follow or give fatwa with or be guided by other minor opinions. That's why we have a difference of opinion in the first place. When you teach the fiqh, that's not how we teach. We teach that this is the mu'tamad of the madhab, this is the mashhur of the madhab, waqila, and this is a weak opinion of the madhab. That's how you teach fiqh. Many students that don't understand that, they think when they hear that, that means that the other weak stuff or the non-mu'tamad is you can't follow it. That's not. Why do we teach it then? Why is it in the book if we don't follow it? When I teach you guys fiqh or usul al-fiqh, I don't give you the dalil from the mawdu' hadith. Why? Because the mawdu' hadith you can't build on it. We have catalogs, we know where they are, the mawdu'at and stuff like that, and we preserve them because we have confidence in our intellectual apparatus that we even keep the things that were forged, but they're not taught in the book. So if I teach in a book, or not me, but if the madhab teaches in the book that a Shabra Malsi said this, or a Ramli said that, or Al-Haytami said this, or a Rafi opposed a Nawawi, or something like that, or Nawawi in order of death date, and Nawawi argued against Rafi on this, it doesn't mean that the other opinion is trash and we throw it away. It just means that this, according to the rules and parameters of our madhab, this is the strong opinion. So if you want to ask what is the Shafi'i opinion on this subject, this is going to be the answer. It does not mean that there are not other opinions. So this is something that you have to be comfortable with, that differing opinions of different strengths coexist. They coexist inside the madhab and they coexist in Islam. So when we talk about modern transactions, we're really looking at all four madhab as one madhab. This is the madhab of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And therefore we're going to take from those opinions that allow us to facilitate, like something as big as this. If we want an Islamic banking alternative to the conventional banking system, we're going to have to combine transactions, we're going to have to split things up, so on and so forth, and we're not going to be able to take the mashhur of every madhab or to take only one madhab. And that's why when we present you the subject matter, we show you the different madhab on the subject. Okay, let me just backtrack just a minute to go through something. Okay, one thing about the prophets, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا اخْتَلَفَ الْأَجْنَاسِ فَبِيعُوا كَيْفَ شِئْتُمْ. If the type of thing that's being sold are different, so it's not like gold and gold, but it's like gold and books, then you can sell in amounts as you like. In other words, there's no cap on the amount of profit. So if I were to sell you a book and say that this book costs $500,000 and you accepted to buy it, that would be a halal transaction, that money is halal. There's no other opinion about that. That's something, it's almost an issue of consensus. Now, you can argue that it's not wise to do that, or it's not advisable to do that. But from the point of view of a strict transaction, as long as the Prophet ﷺ said, if the issues are different, then you can sell as you want. Because as long as there's taradi, as long as there's an agreement between the two sides, you can do that. So the main name of this transaction is al-murabaha. So the seller of the original property, I'm using a house as an example, the seller of the original property is going to make money, and then the bank is going to make money, and you're going to end up with a house. So there is no problem with the making of the money. So usually what happens when the bank promises to buy the property, and then you promise to buy the property back from the bank is going to add a profit margin to itself that in its system of studying and analysis and economic analysis would cover the cost of inflation and the fact that you're going to pay the money back over time and so on and so forth, so that the bank can show its shareholders, the people that own the bank, that it's making a profit on these transactions. Now, I'm just giving you one example, but the Islamic bank is actually doing this maybe 1,000 times a month. So that means every month the bank is getting thousands of payments, and those payments are the base cost of buying the original item plus the increase. So that increase, universally, there's no problem in creating that increase. And as I said, just to reiterate, that's how a lot of the modern fuqaha argue against the interest in the conventional banking system. Another thing to emphasize is that the person who's selling things, as I just kind of the same point, but to say it another way, has the right to price the thing as he sees fit. So maybe it took me extra effort to get this coffee versus somebody else who just bought it at the port, but I went to the farm. So there are all sorts of things that happen. I feel that this is a rare coffee, a special coffee. It's very unique. Therefore, it's going to be $80 a pound or $80 a kilogram. Whereas you go to the market and the price of coffee, if you figured it out by kilogram based on its retail price, it's like $1 a kilogram. You're like, how is that even possible? So that's why we have different costs and there's different stories behind products and efforts. And in Islam, we have no problem with that. Again, as long as it's not duplicitous, you're not lying, and there's taradi, you agree to that. The salam transaction, buying something mawsufun with dhimma and getting it later, that's also an important transaction to revive and to remember from our fiqh discussion, because this is essentially what's happened is in the example that we've been using, that the bank buys the house and then you agree to buy the house from the bank. You're buying it, in the future, and that's the basic idea and philosophy behind the salam transaction. And then, as I said, there's a difference of opinion between the madhahib about combining multiple transactions. By the way, on that issue of combining multiple transactions and indeed inventing new transactions, this is something where we definitely step out of our madhab, because our madhab is a little bit more limiting on that, the Shafi'i madhab that is. And the fiqh council folk and the muftis that meet about this thing, they're going to take the more liberal opinion. Just to reiterate and repeat, that you can combine multiple transactions, and even if there's a need to create a new transaction, you can create a new transaction as long as it doesn't violate any principles of the Sharia. Another condition of this new transaction I forgot to mention is that when the bank sells you the property at the agreed upon cost and installments, the bank cannot increase the cost later. So the bank really has to study, the Islamic bank really has to study how much they're going to sell you the property for, to ensure that there's no problem in the future with inflation or deflation or whatever the case may be, which is why banks have to have economists and analysts that can be able to study that. It ends up being almost the same, if not slightly little more than the extra money, the interest money that you're going to pay from the conventional bank. So on the balance sheet, it becomes the same. It's the same type of math, but we call it different things, the components, and we structure it differently to be compliant with the fiqh. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's lecture, we were able to discuss a new transaction that is been put together by Islamic banking, called al-murabaha lil-amiri bil-shira, a type of profit with a promise of buying. So what ends up happening is, I want to buy a house, the example that we've been using, rather than going to a conventional bank to take out a loan or finance for the house, I go to the Islamic bank. The Islamic bank buys the house on the condition that I have agreed to buy the house from the bank at an agreed upon price. Of course, the price that I'm going to buy from the Islamic bank is going to be more than the bank bought originally. That's why it's called al-murabaha. And we began by saying that in Islamic law, we allow murabaha, we allow profit, and it can be any amount of profit as long as both sides agree to it. The bank then sells me the house because I have promised, and we said that type of promise is both ethically obligatory and legally enforceable. That's the opinion that we take in this case. And of course, I'm going to pay the bank back in installments, because if I had the money up front, I would have just bought the house myself. So in this case, you're going to end up buying in installments. And one of the conditions is that those installments, or the price that I'm going to eventually pay back in total to the bank, doesn't increase. It has to be a set agreed about price. And of course, I said the bank is going to have economists and financial analysts to be able to study and determine that this is the correct amount that they should be selling the property for. In this issue, we have two separate transactions, And the fuqaha have differing opinions about can you put two transactions together to make one transaction. The Shafi'is are a little bit more narrow. So the fiqh councils that take this opinion, take the more liberal opinion that you can put more than one transaction together. And I also highlighted throughout the lecture that the conceptualization of the conventional bank finance oftentimes is incorrect by its critiques. This does not deny the viability and the permissibility of the Islamic banking instrument that we just described, but it's also important to state that you have to understand that when you buy a house, for example, from a conventional bank, the bank is buying the house and you are paying the bank. It's almost the same thing, but some of the words are different. It's just something to keep in mind. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.